Not very long ago, this was extremely commonplace. In the early 2000s going into the 2010s, most people I know that had small children had a portable DVD player. Specifically these ones that go attached to the back of the driver and passenger seats, almost like turning the headrest into a display. Believe it or not, this market was very competitive. So companies came up with a way to give themselves a competitive advantage, and some of these DVD players had the ability to play these very basic video games. But I was browsing my local Goodwill and I found this one and thought, you know what, after all this time, I should finally try out these DVD player games. And all of you lucky people are gonna come along with me for this wild ride. Despite its age, this package looks to be in really good shape, so let's see what comes inside. So inside the box, you have the Philips portable DVD player itself, a secondary monitor, which we'll talk about in a second, these two gamepad style controllers, an AC adapter, a auxiliary cable, and an AV to auxiliary adapter. You also have the native 32 game disc, as well as some literature. Over on the top side, you got buttons for brightness, setup, navigation, menus, options, as well as AV mode. It pops open from this orientation, and this is where you slide the disc in. Its main design is to slide over the headrest of a driver or passenger seat so that the kids in the back can watch. But this specific model also has a kickstand, which is a nice touch in case you want to use it indoors and not on the road. Over on its side, you have the port for the power and AV output headphone jack, volume rocker, and some very outdated mini USB ports for Gamepad 1 and Gamepad 2. The secondary display looks like it hasn't been used at all. It still has the adhesive that comes from the manufacturer on it. The display is 7 inches as well, it's got 2 speakers, and this thing feels extremely cheap and flimsy. It's got almost no weight to it at all. These things would get daisy chained to the actual DVD player via the auxiliary cable, and it would pretty much mirror everything that was on the screen of the DVD player, giving each child sitting in the back their own monitor. One neat thing about this secondary display is that it comes with an AV to auxiliary adapter, meaning you would actually be able to hook up other devices to this, such as a retro gaming console or even other video devices, giving this thing actually a ton more utility than the DVD player itself. And these gamepads that this thing comes with are absolutely atrocious. They feel extremely cheap and flimsy. The D-pad is super wobbly, and the 4 face buttons feel like they'll get worn out within a few hundred presses. And this game disc isn't any better. The label on the front looks like it was printed on there using one of those old Light Scribe DVD burners. One positive is that this thing looks like it's hardly ever been used. So hopefully with some luck, all of these games will work. So I popped in the disc, and after making about 30 seconds worth of scratching noises like a first generation Dreamcast, I'm met with this end user agreement that scrolls on the screen for what feels like forever. Once that's done, it takes you to the game list menu, if you can even call it a menu. It's more like a black screen with no music or no animations, just a list of the games and a little screenshot, which oftentimes don't even match the game. Very similar to those Chinese knockoff consoles that I actually used to review on this channel a few years back. Lucky for us, the controller actually worked. And by work, I mean just barely. If you shake the thing hard enough, the D-pad will actually go in a direction on its own. But it works enough for us to actually go into a game. So it looks like we're going forward with this dumpster fire. So the first game we're playing is Animal Friends. It's a pretty basic puzzle game, almost like a Columns or a Sega Swirl if you guys remember that one. It's by no means a good game, but I wouldn't say it's terrible. It's on par with a generic mobile game. One thing I will say is the noises that this thing makes are absolutely obnoxious. Even my cat had to come over wondering what the hell was going on. Up next is World Baseball Classic, and this game looks like a weird mix between a Super Nintendo game and a crappy Flash game from the early 2000s. You can pretty much only do one of two things, which is hit home runs or try to pitch the ball. And there is just so much input delay with this controller, it's damn near impossible to do either. Your player just kind of jitters around, and hitting the ball is an absolute roll of the dice. It's pure luck. Absolutely terrible, and I never wish to play this game again. Up next is basketball, where you're an invisible hand dribbling the ball, while some anime reject behind you pushes the basketball rim back and forth. The object of the game is, of course, to make baskets, all while these poorly drawn cars drive past in the background. I'm beginning to notice a pattern with these games, and I'm not liking it. They seem to have that really generic Flash game feel, and mixed with the massive input delay that I'm getting with this controller, they're borderline unplayable. Another piece of garbage that I never wish to play again. Up next we have Digi Hunter, which from a child development standpoint, I don't think is a bad game. Some math equations pop up on the screen, while balloons carrying the answer to the problem float around in the back. The player has to highlight the balloon with the correct answer and shoot it down. Neat little educational game, nothing more. Up next we have Dragon. The goal of the game is you play as this derpy looking dragon, walking back and forth while fruit encased in ice falls from the sky. The goal is to melt the ice and eat the fruit before it touches the ground. And everything in this game is a different shade of the same damn color. Who thought this was a good idea? Most games on this disc have really washed colors, which cause an overexposed look. I had to play with the brightness turned all the way down and modify some settings on my camera. Absolute trash game, and at this point I'd be pretty pissed off if I was a kid and had only this to play on a long road trip. Next up we have Alchemist for Love, Elemental Adventure. Oh god, I was extremely reluctant on playing this one. I had no idea what the hell it was, but it turned out to just be a Tetris clone, which actually wasn't too bad. Absolutely horrible name for a Tetris clone, but so far this seems to be the best game of the bunch. Next game on the list is Food Rain, which is pretty much the same damn game as that dinosaur one or dragon one or whatever that thing was supposed to be. The only difference here is a specific item pops up on the screen and you have to grab only that item, letting all the other items fall on the ground. Another game that the wonky controls make impossible to play, and it's just overall not very fun. Next up we have Frog. The game is literally called Frog, and surprise surprise, it's a Frogger clone. Frogger's awesome, so this game isn't that bad, but all it did was make me want to play the original Frogger. But similar to that Tetris clone, if I had to be stuck playing any of these games, I could see myself playing this one. Up next we have Gemwood. And surprisingly, this is not a bad game. It's a unique puzzle game where you play as this flying insect whose goal is to move these gems in specific areas. The puzzles start out relatively easy, but get progressively more difficult as the game goes on. When I was filming this, I actually stood playing this game for about 20 additional minutes. Surprisingly, it was pretty fun, and I actually really enjoyed it. Up next, we have this horrible matching game that I forgot what the name was, and I don't even give a damn. I'm not gonna look it back up. But the items flash on the screen for less than a second, and the colors are so damn washed and overexposed, you can't even tell what the hell's what. This game is absolute garbage. Up next, we have Little Mermaid, which is a clone of Feeding Frenzy, if you guys have ever played that game. The fact that of all things they could think to do with the Little Mermaid was to have her eat fish, I think is pretty hilarious. Once again, the controls are so damn awkward, it's impossible to play, and for some reason the damn game kept pausing on its own. I don't know if it was some type of interference with the controller, or if the game is just broken, but I'm leaning towards maybe a little bit of both. Up next is Magic Bowling. You play as this crazed woodland creature who is throwing a bowling ball at some bowling pins. This is accomplished with a bunch of timed meters that pop up on the screen, and as the levels go on, more obstacles will get put in your way, so you kind of have to strategically time what would be the best angle and level of force. Not a terrible little game, but something that we've seen a million times before. Up next we have Mission Express, which is a racing game that feels exactly like a Flash game. Once again, I can see some slight potential in this game, but it just overall is not that fun. Up next we have Whack-A-Mole, and it absolutely sucks, don't even bother. This game is called Rady's Living Tips. There's a few games on this device that have this character named Rady. I don't know if he was a mascot or something like that for this company, but this is a little educational game where you select what animal would go best in what type of environment. Like you put the bird in the birdhouse, you put the livestock in the field, fruit on the tree. The animation's bright and colorful, and I could see the characters actually catching the attention of some younger audience. Next up we have Rady's Magical Adventure, which at first glance I thought it was going to be a platformer, but it's actually an educational RPG. You have these platforming segments where you go up to an enemy, you play these educational mini games in order to defeat said enemy. Pretty innovative design, but very poorly executed. I could see this type of introductory RPG really working if it was made any other way than this. So at this point I was questioning if I even wanted to continue with this video, and the fates have it were on my side. because every game after Rady's adventure did not work and just completely reset the DVD player. There was no visible damage to the disc, so I wonder if these games were just simply not programmed from the jump. From an innovation standpoint, it's really cool to see video games bundled into other devices. Some of these you can't even call them video games. I've seen video game menus that have a higher degree of interactivity than some of these games. At least I'll be able to get some use out of that additional display that came with this thing. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Until next time, this is Ness, signing out.